Okay, Assalamualaikum everybody, and hello. I'm your host, Henna Zaberi. Welcome back to another episode of Justice for All Now. Human trafficking is a global problem and one of the world's most shameful crimes, affecting the lives of millions of people around the world and robbing them of their dignity. Traffickers deceive women, men, and children from all corners of the earth and force them into exploitative situations every day. And although there are numerous forms of exploitation, such as forced labor, domestic servitude, child begging, and the removal of people's organs, today we want to specifically discuss the issue of sexual exploitation. Every day, in every 73 seconds, someone is sexually assaulted. And every 9 minutes, the person who is assaulted, the person is a minor. Only 5 out of every 1,000 perpetrators will end up being arrested, and sites such as Pornhub are large perpetrators who will not be held accountable for their actions. Of all victims under 18, 2 out of 3 are between the ages of 12 to 17. 82% of all victims under 18 are females. 1 in 9 girls under the age of 18 will experience sexual assault at the hands of an adult. So today, I am really, really grateful that I have a wonderful writer, blogger, survivor, and a victim's advocate joining us for the show today. Her name is Rose Kalemba. She has been an inspirational advocate for young women around the world. Her story, which was published on the BBC and was featured there, has been translated into 41 languages around the globe. And from her experience, she has been able to reach out to young people across the country, across the world, who have been, and help them through their trauma and advocate for them. So it is my great pleasure to have with me today, Rose Kalemba. Hi, Rose.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. I'm part of your show.
You know, this is such a sensitive and deep topic. And I know, as survivors, it's sometimes traumatizing to talk about the journey, and then sometimes it's healing. So I wanted you to share your story with us in whatever way you feel comfortable, and let us know, how you became a victim's advocate.
Thank you so much. The most well-known chapter in my story is when I was 14 years old. I was kidnapped, raped, stabbed, and beaten and just repeatedly over the course of about 12 to 13 hours by 3 men in my neighborhood. And the part of that specific chapter of my story that a lot of people don't know is that a fourth man was supposed to be there that night, but apparently had to house sit for his brother, and so he was watching me being assaulted on webcam, but I could not see him. And so this went on for, I said, about 12 to 13 hours, and I was just walking around my neighborhood when this happened and was kidnapped at knife point, and they sexually assaulted me in every way possible, and during much of the night, they filmed it. And the camera guy, I don't think that he sexually assaulted me himself, but the others did. But I don't know because I was unconscious much of the night, so I really can't say. But I don't have any memory of him actually assaulting me, only filming it. And he was the only one who was a minor. He was 17 years old. The other ones were all adults, including the guy on the webcam. And
and how old were you?
I was 14 years old. I was in 8th grade.
You were in 8th grader, and you were in your neighborhood, and you went on a walk, basically.
Yeah, that was kind of my nightly routine to clear my head and to get some exercise and be healthy for sports, was just to go on a walk every night. And it pretty much started out like any other night.
And so how did they find you? When did your parents discover that you were missing?
One of them was my next door neighbor, and the other was his best friend. The only one I had not previously met was the camera guy and the guy in webcam also. And I was just walking when I ran into them, and basically, like, I saw the one guy, he's actually deceased now, one of my attackers, but his name was Mike. He pressed the knife into my back, and I ended up being just like almost kind of frozen in shock, and they forced me to get into a car and took me to this house, which is the camera guy's house, and he was there with his mother and his sister, and they were both home when this happened and did nothing to stop it. And I remember when he took my phone, Mike did, the one guy, as soon as I got to in their vehicle, they took my phone, and my family, even family members that live in other states that I didn't even talk to in years, were blowing up my phone, trying to call me, saying, "We're about to call the police. What are you doing? Are you, like, staying out late? Did you sneak out?" Basically, what's going on? Just answer us. And they were all sitting there mocking me because I said, "Please just let me talk to my family, even if you let me tell them a lie and say I'm fine. Just please let me talk to my family. They're worried sick." And they would not let me talk to my family, and kept just kind of mocking the fact that my family were worried about me. And my family kind of had the mistrust of the police because of other bad experiences we had. So I don't think it really even occurred to my family to call the police unless that was an absolute last resort.
Of course.
And I think at that point they truly believed I had just snuck out or something, which wasn't like me at all. But sorry, the train's going by. But no, yeah, it just...
Yeah, because if that was your nightly routine, I can understand as a parent's point of view. I have a soon-to-be 8th grader, and sometimes he likes to walk around the neighborhood, or I have, that's just normal behavior for kids. So please go on.
It was definitely, it's kind of funny you mentioned that because that was my nightly routine, but I remember clearly, and we were just talking about it recently, my father, that specific night, he said, "Please just stay home, please don't go." Like, I just have a weird feeling, and it gives me chills now to think about it, that he had never said that before, and because that was just my routine, and he said, "Please just stay home," and I'm like, "Oh, it's fine," and kind of blew it off, and ended up going out anyways. And it was a supposedly safe neighborhood. The guy in Ohio is where this happened to me. It's a suburb, not of Cleveland, but like maybe 40 minutes from Cleveland, Ohio. And so it kind of started out like just kind of night until this happened. And I didn't have my phone when I got there. They had taken my phone, and I didn't know how much time had passed. It felt like days. I remember almost being shocked that it was only 12 to 13 hours because it felt like a lifetime. And the BBC article, for the sake of, not being 20 chapters long, had to kind of condense things a bit, but I didn't just say, "Oh, please let me go," and they were like, "Oh, okay," I kind of had to spend the whole night doing like these exhausting mental gymnastics to convince them that I would never tell, and to kind of think like them and get inside their heads while I'm fighting for my life. And it just, I think I almost, when I mentioned earlier that this is just a chapter in my story, this was not the first time I was sexually abused or even trafficked. And I think by then I was just so kind of almost numb to it, because that other situation, when I was 11 years old, a female family member from my extended family trafficked another younger family member and I, who was even younger than I, and let her friends molest and sexually abuse us for usually about $20 each time. So eventually cigarette money for her was worth stealing her innocence away. And coupled with the sexual abuse and trafficking was just every kind of like emotional and physical abuse, neglect, starving us, beating us, things like that, not letting us go to school. And so I was kind of almost so numbed from trauma at that point. And that situation went on for about 2 years. And I had just very narrowly gotten away from it because my other family member who was being hurt finally spoke up. And so it was, shock us the two when the rest of my family found out. But I just barely gotten away from that situation when this happened to me at 14. And a very large part of me is pretty convinced that they're connected and that that was my punishment for escaping, essentially, because it happened in the same city, and this was my next door neighbor, so there's a very high probability that they knew each other. My first trafficker from them. And it just, there's too many coincidences to be a coincidence, you know what I mean? And so I just was so numb by then, and a lot of people asked me, how did you deal with like what happened after yourself by yourself and everything? But it just was almost my life by then, and I didn't know any better. I didn't think things would get any better, and I attempted suicide the morning after my assault, and I just didn't want to be alive anymore. So I had to go back to the hospital where I just went through my injuries, and that was a very dehumanizing experience, but I think speaks volumes about how society treats rape survivors. Because I am now emergency room doctor. When I went to the emergency room, who just was extremely physically rough with me, would not make eye contact with me, told my mom that like I was an unruly child for being gay rights, and just victim blamed me, and didn't even do a rape, which really hurt my court case. So it was just a really awful experience in the hospital.
They didn't do a victim's. They didn't do a rape kit on you.
No, he did not. And I told him that I was raped, but pretty much that's it. Oh, something like.
And this happened at the hospital.
It's the Medina emergency room in Ohio. And I wish I could remember his name. It's like, you know, years later, I'm 25 years old now, almost 26, and I just think like, why didn't I just sue everybody, you know, who. But it's so hard because it's like, you know, you have no health tech, and you don't think that anyone will ever care about you or your story. From the hospital doesn't care, when the police don't care, when the courts don't care. It's like, who else do you turn to? And so, like I was saying, they filmed me a lot of the night, and I thought they were filming me for their personal use. I never in a million years could have predicted what happened next. And the hardest part, the part of my story that kind of made like international news, because it's just so, I don't think a lot of people are aware of this issue until recently. When a blog post of mine went viral in April 2019, I was contacted by the BBC, and what I talked about in that blog post was how the videos that this on Pornhub, 6 videos of my rape. And I remember, like, it was yesterday, just feeling like my blood turned to ice and feeling cold all over, and just my hands shaking so bad I couldn't even type, because someone had sent a link on MySpace and was making fun of me. And they were saying details before I even clicked on the link. I knew, because they were saying details that they could not have possibly known unless they were there. And that's when it dawned on me they were there, which was not at the time. They were there by seeing it, and with every click and every view count, because when I first saw the videos, they had like, I think like 10,000 or so views each. But every time I went back, the views went higher and higher, and the highest viewed one had over 400,000 views. And all 6 of them were in the millions combined. Like over 2 million last time I saw. Or this time they got taken down. And as soon as I found out about the videos, I emailed Pornhub. I Googled their email address, and I begged them every single day for over 6 months. That's over 200 days straight. I said, this is me being raped. I'm a minor. Please help me. And the titles were things like me being slapped around, me being destroyed, me passed out, and real teen being raped. And you could tell by that I was a real teen. Not to mention that the comment section quickly filled up with men posting my address, where I went to school, how old I was, my real name, and my birthday, and said, oh, we need to make a countdown until she turns 18. And some like men said things like, oh, she looks old, and a guy would be like, oh, actually she's 14. And some guy said this is clearly a rape, and that it made him go soft down there, and he couldn't watch that. And another guy said, oh, don't call the cops when you're off, or something along those lines. And it was just like, it was a big joke to everyone, and anyone who even mildly cared didn't care enough. And
so I'm going to ask. So so if someone can't hear and wasn't able to catch, and some people have just joined in, I'm just going to recap that our guest Rose was 14 at that time. She was walking in her neighborhood. She was abducted by her next door neighbor, adult men, as well as a 17-year-old camera person. And not only was she sexually assaulted for 12 to 14 hours, and when she was taken to the hospital, they refused to do or they just didn't do a rape kit on her, which hurt her case later. And aside from that, she was traumatized not just then, she was re-traumatized again when her her videos were posted, and you found out through MySpace. How old were you when you found that out?
I had just turned 15 when I found out, and I was kind of still in a state of shock because there was this man who reached out to me on MySpace almost immediately after my assault, and he told me he was a youth pastor, a Christian youth pastor, and that his mom was a therapist, and they wanted to help me, and they had heard what happened. And so, to make a very long story short, this man groomed me for months. He was 20 years old. He groomed me for months and told me, I care about your story. I want to help you. I'm so sorry for what you went through. And I finally agreed to meet up with him after months of intense grooming. And I didn't find out until he messaged me on Facebook saying, I'm so sorry. I'm going to help for what I've done. I'm so sorry. He was the guy on webcam who was supposed to be there that night. And he sent me like this long message about, oh, I just couldn't miss out or whatever. I was supposed to have been there. So, and part of me just wished he would have assaulted me and not groomed me for months and made me think I had someone I could trust. But he ended up assaulting me months later, the other guy that was supposed to be there that night. And he was one of the people on MySpace who was like saying things about the video and stuff. And I still wonder to this day if he recorded videos of me too. I was drugged when I went to his house. I was not drugged when I was 14, but a few months later when I turned 15, and he assaulted me as well. I was drugged. I have almost no memory of it. And I don't know what he did. I don't know if he recorded it as well and put it online. I probably will never know that. Mm-hmm. But I've been working with photo DNA specialists to work to protect victims like us to try to see if there's anything that can be found out there. But it's a very difficult and painful process. And I still to this day don't know what all of these did, but I remember being in severe pain, and my clothes, some of them were missing, and I just was like in my yard. I woke up in my backyard in the middle of the night before he dumped me, and so he was posting about it too in my face. This other rapist who was supposed to be there that night, and he was saying like, oh, he doesn't agree with them posting it online, trying to kind of almost take a moral high ground, and act like he wasn't a rapist too. He's like, oh, they shouldn't have posted that. They went too far and things like that.
So you were 15 when you saw and you found out, and for 200 days you emailed this company called Pornhub and asked them to take down your videos, that they were commodifying and monetizing and selling. And this is not something that is unique to you, you have found out. It has happened to many other young women and other people. And it wasn't until that you pretended to be a lawyer that they finally took did they take all of them down, your videos down? Or can you tell us that part of the story?
Well, from the very first email I sent them, I said not only am I being raped, but my specific rapists, the men who raped me, including the guy who was supposed to have been there that night, there were like dozens of videos of them raping other girls up as well on Pornhub. And some of them looked even younger than I, and a lot of them were familiar to me because they would make me watch them during my assault. They would be like, oh, you know, when they weren't filming, they'd be like, look what we did to her, look what we did to her, and laughing about it like it was some kind of joke, like they didn't even have a soul. And so there were videos of these other girls that would come up in the suggested or related titles under my videos, and I recognized the girls from the videos, and my rapist had their faces hidden, and one of them wore a comment. But I recognized the girls, and I knew that it was them, and I recognized their voices. And I said from the very first email to Pornhub that these other little girls are being raped too by my same attackers. You need to take these down too. And I said that in every single email. And finally, I decided I was honestly about ready to just try to take my own life again. I just couldn't live with it anymore. The views had climbed so high. Men were stalking me in person, showing up at my school and my house. And I just couldn't bear with life anymore. So I decided, you know, I don't want to live anymore. And then kind of right before I planned to try to take my own life again, I had this idea, like, what if I pretend to be a lawyer? And then I'm like, no, you'll go to jail. Like as a kid, you think, oh, you'll go to jail for that. You know, it's like the person being a police officer, you can't do that. But I thought, what else am I going to do? And if I go to jail, I'll just kill myself anyway, you know, like because I was already so severely depressed, you know, I was 15 years old. And you as a 15-year-old were more scared of going to jail for pretending to be a lawyer than these adult men were of not only raping a minor, but
monetizing and making money off of that. God forbid. So
Absolutely.
this whole experience has been like, what, what if there is a young woman or a young man who has perhaps gone through something, what would you hope that other people learn from your story?
One thing that has been super important to me is that I've carried this shame and victim blamed myself for so many years. I would never victim blame another victim, but I have myself, because it just was so deeply ingrained in me from 11 years old. And even earlier when I was sexualized by grown men, 8 years old as early as I can remember, of a grown man making inappropriate comments about my body. And I would want to tell other victims that this is not our shame to carry. We didn't do this, and we are not the broken ones. And that's why I chose to use my real name and show my face for the BBC article, because I did have the right to remain anonymous as a sexual assault survivor. But I chose not to because I want other survivors to know that this is not on us. We are not at fault here. It doesn't matter if you're walking down the street naked. You never deserve to be sexually assaulted. It doesn't matter if you're actively sleeping with someone or if they're your husband. If you say no or you say stop and they don't, then that's assault. And that we always have rights. So we're not somebody's sister or somebody's daughter. We're human beings, and that's enough. We don't have to, our value isn't defined by our relation to someone else.
And this
that we
so
matter
important.
And our no's matter.
And this is so important for our audience to listen to, because these topics are so taboo in our communities, so taboo. We don't even talk about them a lot of times. I just noticed a few days ago, Muslim young women on Twitter were talking about being assaulted by religious teachers, being assaulted by cousins, people that they knew, friends, and it was even people who you would never think, like you just said, it was a youth pastor from a church. And you would never think that somebody like that would be, but it can happen to anybody. And you also talked about, used a term called grooming. What does grooming mean?
Grooming is most commonly used in the context of internet predators, but it can happen with someone that you met in person too. Originally, it doesn't have to be someone you met online. But grooming is when these predators use psychological manipulation tactics to make you believe that they're your friend, that they care about you, that the only ones who are there for you. They understand you, but it has to be our secret because other people wouldn't understand our friendship. And it's just this, and it sounds like so many people who haven't experienced that say that, how could you fall for this essentially? And I was not an ignorant child. I grew up way beyond my years, starting at 11. So I was not naive to men or the ways of, these predators. But I still fall for it because it just is what they do. And it's essentially their area of genius is just convincing us that they care about us and want to help us and that they're the only ones we can trust. And then when they do something to us, our brains almost have that kind of Stockholm syndrome of, still wanting to somehow protect them. I did not tell anyone that this fourth man, his name is David, I did not tell anyone that he assaulted me until I was 18. Because by then I was just like, what else can possibly happen? No one's ever going to believe me. And I think he knew that, and that's why he was bold enough to just send me a Facebook message about it, because he knew that I wasn't going to say anything. And I still felt like, not a sense of loyalty to him, but I felt like, wow, he's right, no one's going to believe me.
And this is something that also, there's several things that you mentioned that are so important for all of us to just think about, and that there, who believes you, number one, what, and then you used a word called victim blaming, and a lot of people don't understand that either. What does that mean to? And it might seem very clear, right? Like you don't blame the victim, but there are many manifestations of this. So it could be, you don't even have to say, it was your fault. There are several other ways that people can blame victims, even though they're not actually saying, oh, it's your fault. So just the fact that you were not given, you weren't taken seriously at the hospital, that's a form of victim blaming when you do not take, as a doctor, don't take a rape kit off a young person who is telling you that they've been sexually assaulted. because then essentially you're telling them you don't believe them and whatever happened to them is their fault.
Yeah. He said he believed I had consensual sex, but it was too rough for my liking. The doctor said this to me, like to my face.
And you were all of 14 years old.
14 years old. I was stabbed. I was beaten very badly. I couldn't believe it. And it makes me wonder if he's a predator too. And what you were saying about victim blaming is you're absolutely right. It's not always super obvious. There's a lot of microaggressions. And I think when people say, what were you wearing? What were you doing out so late? Any kind of comment like that, what were you thinking? And instead of saying, why did this person rape you? Why did this rapist do this? What is wrong with them? Instead of, you place the blame on the victim. And I know a lot of people are of the mind that, telling women different, or, any potential victim self-defense techniques is also a form of victim blaming. I think the approach and how you do it makes all the difference, because I'm all about teaching people to empower themselves and be able to defend themselves, but I don't do it in a way that somehow, blames them for what happened to them. I just want us to have every inch we can. And, but yeah, just different things like that. And just essentially blame, and I've seen women who do sex work getting blamed extra hard for things that have happened to them. Oh, you do this for a living, so they were entitled to access your body against your consent. And that's just, there's no excuse to rape someone ever. And it shouldn't matter what they do for a living, what they're wearing, what they were doing out late at night or in a rough neighborhood. It should matter that someone chose to rape them.
Now, if you're comfortable, if you could discuss some of the psychologically harmful effects of assault, because a lot of times people don't discuss that, people don't want to hear about that, and even the fact that right now you're not on camera is because of the anxiety that you feel because of everything that has happened to you. You shared that with us. And you shared other things. So if whatever you feel comfortable sharing, some of the psychologically harmful. So there's the physically harmful effects. Obviously, that's assault victim will go through. But what are some of the psychologically harmful effects?
A lot of the victims that I've worked with, and about it's been almost 9 years now since I've been a victim's advocate, a lot of them struggle with alcohol or drug addiction issues because they just want to find any way to numb this pain. And a lot of victims, including myself, struggle with eating disorders because you just want to feel some sense of control over your body, whether that's starving yourself or making yourself throw up after you eat, or binge eating to numb yourself. Binge eating is a very common one with abuse survivors. We just want to almost numb our feelings by making ourselves physically hurt to the, and it just kind of numbs that pain a bit. And complex PTSD and depression and anxiety are extremely common. I have severe panic attacks. I have a very difficult time going out in public. I work from home, so that kind of lets me get away with not having to go out all that often. And I get severe anxiety attacks a lot, and sometimes flashbacks, and I can't sleep. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. A lot of victims struggle with other things, a lot of the victims I've worked with struggle with dissociative identity disorder, which is where your brain will develop other personalities to try to and it's in almost every case that I've seen, it's the trauma response. And it's your brain trying to create these other personas that can protect you when you feel like you can't protect yourself. And I've seen so many victims go through that. Some of my friends who are survivors struggle with that. And there's really no limit to the kind of mental effect of these crimes, because it just makes you feel so unsafe in the world, so unsure of your place in it. And it's so hard to take back that power. And as women, when we try to take back that power, we're called vulgar names. We're shamed for expressing that part of ourselves. It's like society is fine with women being sexualized if the man is doing it against her will, but when a woman owns that part of herself and does what makes her feel empowered, she's shamed for it and blamed for it. But society is more than happy to consume it when it's against her will.
And that leads us to how this entire, this platform, and this is something new that we're seeing in history, because there have never been platforms so huge, run by like this Mind Geek is the name of the organization, the corporations, and they make billions of dollars a year. And they run several pornography websites. And this is how a lot of people are learning. A lot of young men are learning about sex because they're not learning it from a lot of, times they're not learning in a healthy way. And not only just that, this is the violence that they're seeing and they're selling. And again, and so just the thought of it like wasn't possible during the time perhaps that I was growing up, because we didn't have the internet, right? We didn't grow up in that. And so you all, or the children who are growing up even now, they have to deal with this reality, is that whatever they do or say, or whatever was done or said to them, can be now shared across platforms, and no one can stop it, right? No one can, because did your rapist go to jail? Did the Pornhub get were they shut down? No. Right? So where is the justice? And this is why we're discussing this today, because we believe this is a human rights issue. This is not just a moral issue.
My rapist, the cameraman, is only when he was underage at the time. He was 17, almost 18. He did not get any charges at all. All of the adults involved got charged as juveniles. And my lawyers, who've been practicing law for like 30 years, told me they've never seen this in their entire careers. And I have the court document to prove it that says the above named juvenile. And they were adults. They were over 18, the rapists were. And they somehow got charged as adults, which what that means is the records are sealed. I can look up my case number, nothing will come up there, not in any sex offender registry. And I risk being sued if I publicly name them. With my lawyer's blessings and being sued, I am going to publicly name them. But as part of an upcoming lawsuit, which I can't talk a whole lot about right now, but I'll be posting about it as soon as I can on Twitter and everything. And but yeah, it's terrifying to think that I could be sued for talking about what happened to me, and they just were able to move on with their lives like nothing happened. And the implications of that are so severe because they assaulted many girls before me. One of my rapists, he passed away last September. I don't know if it was possibly a murder or a suicide, because it's very hard to find information surrounding his death. And my friend, who's usually very good at finding that stuff out, was not even able to. And I just found out from Googling him randomly that he had passed away. And I remember being so scared when the BBC story came out that he in particular was going to come after me, and I didn't know he had already been dead 2 months. But I kind of lost my train of thought. Sorry, I'm not sure.
That's fine. So let's talk about advocacy. Let's talk about activism, because now we know that this. I mean, we just went over stats, how prevalent it is, and how damaging it can be. So what can people do? So one of the things, this Trafficking Hub campaign was found by Layla Mikowait, and it's powered by the anti-trafficking organization Exodus Cry. It's a non-religious, non-partisan effort to hold the largest porn website in the world accountable for enabling and profiting off of mass sex trafficking and exploitation of women and minors. And this campaign, it's supported by a broad spectrum of over 300 child protection, anti-trafficking, women's rights and human rights organizations, as well as experts and trafficking survivors of all backgrounds. So we're part of this. We want people to take action. When this started off, there were a few 100,000. It got to a few 100,000 in the petition, but the petition now is at well over 1 million. So this is like something that is global. People are upset about it globally, and there are people, even elected officials around the world, who are very concerned about this. And it's not, the more attention these causes can get, the more attention this is shown, then, for example, one of the things that was just highlighted was a 15-year-old girl who'd been missing for a year was finally found after her mother was tipped off that her daughter was being featured on videos on that site. 58 such videos of her sexual assault were discovered.
And she was verified by them.
And she was verified by them. What does that mean?
Verification on Pornhub is claiming that they verified her age and everything. And verified profiles on there will have a blue check similar to Twitter, I believe. And it says that this is a legit profile. We verified their identity and their age, but that's a lie. And they've had multiple cases come forward recently of minors being verified on their site, so their verification system means absolutely nothing. And that 15-year-old trafficking victim was verified on there.
So Senator Ben Sasse has recently called on the Department of Justice to investigate Pornhub over these videos shown of victims of trafficking being raped. So this is something that definitely signed a petition. People can call on their senators and ask them to join Senator Ben Sasse on calling on the Department of Justice to investigate this. What are other things that you as a victims advocate can tell us? Because this really cannot be just about the pain, because it has to, you've been so inspirational in this, way, and I hate to put any additional burden on you, but you've seen it, you've been helping others out. What can other people do to, and what have you been able to do to turn that energy into something that can cause change?
Well, when this was actively happening to me when I was 14 and then 15 years old, one of the things that kept me going was fighting for the other girls of the other victims of my same rapist that were on the site. And when I impersonated a lawyer and finally got my videos, they were gone within 48 hours after I impersonated a lawyer and emailed them. But they left the videos of the other girls up. So I emailed them again and said, absolutely not. You need to take these down too. And this came down even quicker. And I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I had let those videos stay up after mine had been taken down. No victim should ever be treated like somebody else's problem. And I think that's the key point, is that many people treat us like someone else's problem. It's not personally affecting me or my family, so I don't care about it. And I think that that's so important. And that's kind of what got me into advocacy at such a young age, was just knowing what it felt like to be treated that way and refusing to treat other victims that way. And I know it's kind of controversial and unpopular in some circles, but I believe in an almost like guerrilla activism. Like, these predators do not take no for an answer. That's kind of the whole point. So I think they need to be, face social consequences for this. And I believe in exposing people who harass victims, because that's a key part of rape culture. People who harass us, the hundreds of messages I get every single week, saying, "Oh, rape the link, I want to see your rape," or "Oh, I love the way you got assaulted," or even some containing graphic details that they could only know if they've seen the videos or downloaded them, because those details were never made public. I get messages like that every single day. And a lot of these people, a lot of my Twitter followers, have helped me to expose these people. We find out where they work and call their places of work and get them fired. And people try to say, "Oh, it's cancel culture, it's childish to do that." But that's, if someone made a silly comment when they were 12, an ignorant comment, that's cancel culture. It's not canceling for, childish or immature to call out and expose predators. So that's what we do, and what we help other victims do too, because that's the only way these people will face social consequences. I currently am reaching out to Best Buy, who employs 2 of my attackers. And I'm going to send them the court documents and everything, but I still haven't heard back from them. But I think these people need to have their lives ruined, and then that'll make them think twice before either assaulting someone or harassing a victim. Because all of those things work together to keep us silent and suffering alone. Not only the assault, but the victim blaming. I know so many assault victims would come forward and they weren't met with this terrible culture of, "Oh, she must be lying," or "Oh, he must be lying," or, "What were you doing? You were asking for it. You deserved it." Or, "I think this is funny that this happened. I'm going to make memes about it," and things like that. And I think that people need to pay social consequences for behaving that way. And then maybe the next person will think twice before treating a victim that way and making it even harder for them to come forward. So that's just my personal view. And I've seen it to be extremely effective. And
so what you're saying is that there are many, many aspects to this, and people can get involved, even if it's little things like calling up Best Buy and letting them know that a perpetrator is working there, or they can get involved with, maybe it's not, they've witnessed it in their own church or their mosque or their community, and then having a process. So for example, in the Muslim community, there's an organization called FACE, which is facing abuse in the community. And some of the things that they do is they investigate these things when because there is no community organization that would hold people, like if they're teachers or if they're religious leaders or they're youth group leaders, who's holding them accountable, right? So and those are some things that people can support, and if you know something, then just not being. So how can someone, like, suppose someone opens up to you, maybe you're not an activist, maybe you're just someone listening to this, and your heart goes out and you don't want this to happen again, and then someone in your family or someone else comes up to you and shares their experience with you. What are some things that some people should not do, and what are some things that they should do?
That's something I talk about a lot. I thought that when people say ignorant things online or openly harass like public victims like myself, know that your family members who've been assaulted are watching, and they see you behaving this way, and you no longer are a safe place for them to come to that they're on assault, because they're going to wonder if you're going to turn on them too. And I personally have been on the other side of that. Like, when I have extended family members or friends who didn't know that I was assaulted before I went public, they, and they would be saying detrimental things about other survivors. I thought, well, I'm never going to tell you, I'm never going to trust you with this. And so I think
that's a really, really important point that you just made, Rose. I just want to reiterate it just in case someone didn't hear it, because I know the voice volume. So Rose just said that if any member, if someone in your family, or if you are the sort of person who is making these comments about victims or survivors, and you're either making fun, or you're harassing, or you're casually saying things, know that victims in your own family, that they're watching, and they know now that you're not a safe person for them to come to in case that they have gone through a sexual assault. Okay, carry on, please.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It totally writes you off as a safe person for them to go to, and you might be the only person they had to talk to, so then they have nobody. And I think that more people need to listen instead of talking. Like, I know personally for me, it doesn't really help to have unsolicited advice. I just want to feel listened to with sincerity, and to not be kind of given advice that's, well-intended, but probably will not help, and it's probably something that I already thought of myself as someone who's lived it. And to just be supportive, and to not tell us, oh, what were you thinking going out so late, or what were you wearing, or be careful of how you dress, be careful of this or that, but just to say that I'm so sorry this happened to you, or rather, instead of I'm so sorry this happened, you say, I'm so sorry they did this to you. Because it's not something that happened, it's not a car accident, it's a purposeful, deliberate crime against humanity.
That's so powerful, that this is not, this is, and yes, it didn't happen. It's someone did something. It's like a murder doesn't happen. Someone killed somebody. That's when some other person dies. In the same way, we need to change the language around sexual assault. So
absolutely,
so even when commiserating with someone who's been through this, to use language that puts the blame on the people who did this, who committed the crime. Very, very powerful.
Thank you so much. And I just think that, there's just so many problems in the way people support survivors. It's not really a support system at all. And I've even seen this kind of victim blaming from other women. For example, I've only shared this one other time publicly. It wasn't featured in my BBC story or anything, but a lot of people don't know this. But my best friend was there the night I was assaulted in a different part of the house, and I'm positive she heard me screaming and stuff, but somehow still blamed me and said that I was asking for it. And she saw how badly I was hurt, but still didn't care. And kind of just, I think the context of that too, the background context, is that she grew up in a family that talked very horribly about rape victims. And I remember being stunned all the time by how they talked about rape victims, her mother and her stepdad. And just like said that, like, essentially, like, almost implying there's no such thing as rape, and the woman had to have been asking for it or giving some sort of signal that it was okay. So that's what she grew up around. And then for her to be there that night in the same house, and she did not get sexually assaulted. She just was apparently downstairs, like, watching TV the entire time. And I know she had her heartbeat screaming, and I know she saw what I looked like. And apparently there were multiple times she was in the room, and I don't remember, sometimes I was unconscious, like, from the beatings. But it just hurt so badly that I don't understand. And then after that, ironically, I was not allowed to be her friend anymore because her stepdad said that she's going to be accusing your cousins of rape. And it just was so mind-blowingly crazy because I had been assaulted before. And I told her about what my family member did to me, but I said that I made up some fake name of somebody I didn't know. I said, it was a boyfriend named Kyle, because I was too ashamed to say my own female family member did that to me. But everything else was true. And she was, like, initially supportive, but then kind of told her family and stuff, and they would make fun of me, and her mom would kind of, like, send texts to my classmates pretending to be a kid, trying to, like, call me all these horrible names. And it's just a whole toxic culture, and it's disappointing to see other females perpetuating it because we are the most affected by it. And it would have changed everything for me. I don't think I would have attempted suicide that next morning if I had had a friend who said, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Look at you. I can tell what happened. I don't blame you for this. It's not your fault. I'm here for you. Instead of her, like, almost treating it like it was a joke and like I deserved it. And I do not blame her for not being able to stop it. She was a child too. We were the same age. But I do blame her and hold her accountable for how she reacted afterwards.
And this is something too, this shame, right? The shame that comes with it. And this transcends all cultures. This transcends everybody who goes through it, because of just that, like, it's not like a crime. It's not considered a crime. It's considered almost like it's on a separate category altogether, right? So this is something that really stops people from talking about it, stops people from getting help, and just keeps that cycle going. And it's okay. So what changes would you like to see? We have a minute or so before we have to end the show. What concrete changes would you like to see that perhaps could be, and what you have learned from your advocacy, that perhaps could bring some sort of change?
I would like to see victim-focused intervention and help, like getting us the resources and help that we need and that we specifically ask for, and being asked those things to begin with, instead of organizations or people trying to help us in ways that they think are best. Like, for example, forcing us to report to law enforcement is not helpful, because a lot of times, like, I was sexually harassed by the police officers on my case. They made comments about my body and kept calling my adult rapists the boys. So if someone told me I had to report to get help, then I'd be like, no thanks, bye, if I could go back. And so I think being forced to report to law enforcement is definitely not helpful, and it should always be a victim's choice whether they want to go through that or not, because it almost always ends up being re-traumatizing. So I think that victim-focused, like, ask victims what we want, ask what we need, and I so appreciate that you're doing that right now. And I think more of, the organizations and advocates designed to help us, I wish more would do that. And actually, this guy who started the trafficking help petition has actually been excellent about listening to us and our needs and giving us tangible help. And I've never experienced that kind of help before. Nicole is another, the national.
That is something so powerful. And this is what it is. Like, unless someone has gone through it, how would they even know? How would they know what all goes into it? What other aspects to look into, and what helps and what doesn't help? And yes, everybody's situation might be different, but just like, and this is something, like, as we're talking about defund police and a lot of things that have been coming up too, this is something that consistently we see victims say, is that actually the police didn't really help me much, because that's another trope that is out there, that, oh, what will we do if, God forbid, the police wasn't out there catching rapists? So that is something, definitely. But I am so grateful to you, Rose, for being with us here today and sharing. I see you so active on Twitter, and I see that the harassment is another story that we could probably take an hour to talk about. But just being able to talk and listen to your, and be the advocacy that is victim advised, and survivor advised, that is so powerful. And I am eternal, thank you so much. And I urge everybody here to sign the petition. It's in the comments. Reach out to your elected officials about going to the Department of Justice to take this company down. And the victim, and the monetizing of victims' experiences and the assault is just something that none of us should be okay with. And so thank you so much, everybody, for being here. You were watching the Justice for All Now show, and we'll see you tomorrow.